just around the corner, and a cozy little corner. Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, two of the coolest cats in showbiz, were more than just members of the legendary Rat Pack. They were the heartbeat of it, with charm, style, and voices that could melt hearts. They ruled the stage and made women swoon wherever they went together. With Sammy Davis Jr. they lit up Vegas like no one else could. The Rat Pack wasn't just a group, it was a vibe. Their chemistry was electric, their jokes effortless, and their performances unforgettable. Fans couldn't get enough. Offstage, Frank and Dean were the closest of friends, always seen laughing, drinking, and having a good time, or so it seemed. That's why it came as a total shock when news broke that Dean Martin had suddenly cut Frank Sinatra out of his life just like that. No more calls, no more hangouts, no more Rat Pack magic. What could possibly go so wrong between two best friends, two legends, that one would slam the door shut without warning? Well, according to those close to the stars, it all came down to one moment. From knuckle boxing to the big stage, before he was Dean Martin, the smooth-talking, whiskey-sipping king of cool, he was just a tough kid from Ohio with a dream and a punch. Born as Dino Paul Crocetti on June 7, 1917 in Steubenville, Ohio, he was the son of Gaetano, a hard-working barber from Italy, and Angela, an Italian-American woman with strong roots of her own. Life wasn't glamorous growing up. His father snipped hair in a small shop while his mother kept the family going with love and grit. Young Dino had an older brother named William, and let's just say things got scrappy early on. At 15, Dino stepped into the ring and gave himself a name. Kid Crochet, tough, bold, and broke. He threw punches with bare knuckles because he couldn't afford the tape. Most fighters used the result, a crooked nose, later fixed a lip scar, and countless bruises. Still, he fought with heart, though he joked that he won all but 11 of his 12 matches. But life had bigger plans for Dino. He moved to New York and shared a tiny apartment with a fellow showbiz hopeful named Sonny King. With little money and a lot of guts, they did something wild. They charged people to watch them bare knuckle box in their apartment. No ring, no gloves, just raw fights. Dean even knocked out Sonny in the first round of one match. Talk about hustle when he finally hung up his gloves. Dino didn't exactly turn to the straight and narrow. He worked in an illegal casino behind a tobacco shop, first as a stock boy, then as a roulette stickman and croupier. But all along he held tight to one thing, his voice, calling himself Dino Martini, a nod to opera singer Nino Martini. He crooned with local bands influenced by the smooth sounds of Harry Mills and Perry Como. His big break came when he joined the Ernie Mackay Orchestra, and by the late 30s he was already capturing hearts with that velvet voice. Applause. No. In 1940 he started working with Cleveland band leader Sammy Watkins, who gave him one key piece of advice: change your name. And just like that, Dean Martin was born. By 1943 Dean was performing in New York, and though he was briefly drafted into the Army during 1-2, he was discharged after 14 months due to a hernia. But the stage kept calling, and somewhere along the way love found him. In October 1941 Dean married Elizabeth Betty Ann MacDonald, and they settled in Cleveland Heights. Together they had 4 children. Before parting ways in 1949, it was a winding road from a small-town boxer to one of America's most iconic entertainers. But that was Dean Martin. Tough, charming, and always full of surprises. Dean Martin's early success. By the mid-1940s, Dean Martin was grinding it out in New York City. He had the voice, the looks, and undeniable charm. Night after night he sang in smoky clubs, hoping for that big Hollywood break. Studios like Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Colia Pictures noticed him, but the offers never came. The spotlight seemed just out of reach. But then fate stepped in with a twist of comedy in August 1944. At the Belmont Plaza Hotel in New York, Dean was performing at the Glass Hat Club when he crossed paths with a young, wildeed comedian named Jerry Lewis. Their first conversation was brief but powerful, according to Jerry. Dean strolled up and said, "Hey, I saw your act. You're a funny kid." Simple words, but those words sparked one of the most iconic duos in showbiz history. At first, it was just a friendship. They were two entertainers hustling on the same bill, sharing a dream and a deep hunger for success, but they had something else. Electric chemistry on stage. It was like lightning in a bottle. Then came July 24th, 1946 at the 500 Club in Atlantic City, their official debut as a team, but things went south fast. The audience wasn't feeling it, not a single laugh. After the first set, club owner Skinny D'Amato didn't sugarcoat it, make it work tonight or you're out with everything on the line. Dean and Jerry huddled backstage, no script, no plan, just instinct. Dean would sing, Jerry would cause chaos, and that's exactly what they did. Jerry stumbled on stage dressed as a clumsy bus boy, dropping plates, bumping into Dean and turning the performance into a hilarious mess. Dean kept his cool, crooning away as Jerry created mayhem. The crowd went wild and the room erupted with laughter. They had found their formula from that night on. Martin and Lewis were a sensation. Their act was unpredictable, wild, and utterly original. They didn't perform for the audience. They performed with each other. Jerry would heckle Dean mid-song. Dean would chase Jerry across the stage. It was madness, and people adored it. Soon they were headlining the Copacabana, performing to packed crowds across the East Coast and redefining comedy with their mix of music, slapstick, and pure charisma. In 1948, they made their television debut on The Ed Sullivan Show, then called The Toast of the Town, sharing the stage with the likes of Rogers and Hammerstein to keep things fresh. They brought in young writers too, names you might recognize today: Norman Lear and Ed Simmons. These soon-to-be legends helped polish their routines, opening them up to even wider audiences. By 1949, Martin and Lewis had their own radio show and a shiny new deal with Paramount Pictures. Their film debut, My Friend Irma, made the movie stars. The money wasn't outrageous, $75,000, but their agent made sure they had something better control. Under York Productions, they co-produced one film a year and called the shots on everything: clubs, radio, TV, and records. And the money followed, millions. But the heart of the act wasn't just fame or fortune, it was friendship. Jerry even stood beside Dean as his best man when he remarried in 1949. On stage, they were magic. Off stage, they were brothers, or so it seemed. As the years rolled on, cracks started to show. Dean began to feel like the straight man to Jerry's loud spotlight, stealing comedy. Creative differences turned into quiet resentment behind the laughter. Tension simmered, then in a twist no one saw coming, the curtain fell. July 25, 1956, exactly 10 years after their big break, they performed together for the last time. The team of Martin and Lewis was over, but their impact unforgettable. They changed comedy, they changed television, they changed each other's lives, and though the laughter stopped, the legend never died. The famous Rat Pack. While the curtain had closed on Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, the spotlight wasn't done with Dean, not even close. In fact, his best days were just beginning. By the late 1950s, Martin had hit his stride. His solo career was on fire, his voice smooth like fine whiskey, and his confidence sharper than ever. And waiting in the wings, cocktail in hand and ready to roll, was another legend, Frank Sinatra. Dean and Frank had first crossed paths in the early 1940s when Martin was still a fresh face trying to break into the music world, but it wasn't until 1958 that they really clicked, starring together in Some Came Running, Alongside Shirley Mlan, the movie was a hit, but more importantly, it lit the spark for a friendship that would become the heartbeat of a cultural phenomenon. That spark grew into something bigger than the screen by the end of the 50s. Martin and Sinatra were the frontmen of a crew that became nothing short of iconic. The Rat Pack. Now here's a juicy little secret: they never actually called themselves the Rat Pack. That name originally belonged to a different group, led by Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Beale. Where Sinatra had once been a regular, it was Beale who first called them a goddamn Rat Pack after one too many wild nights. But Martin Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford and Joey Bishop preferred to call their version the Summit or the Clan. Still, the Rat Pack name stuck and history ran with it. Together they weren't just entertainers, they were the kings of cool. The Rat Pack ruled the Hollywood nightlife, but it was Las Vegas where they truly became legends. When the crew performed at the Sands Hotel, the city pulsed with energy. Mares outside would tease Dean Martin, maybe Frank, maybe Sammy. The message was clear: if you were in the building, anything could happen, and it did. Their shows were wild, electric, and totally unpredictable. One night Dean might be cracking jokes, the next he'd belt out a ballad with Sinatra jumping in mid-note. Sammy Davis Jr. would throw in a tap dance, while Lawford or Bishop kept the laughs rolling. They wore tuxedos, sipped martinis on stage, and traded insults like old friends at a bar. And no one, not even themselves, was off limits. They joked about Frank's love life, Dean's drinking, and Sammy's race and religion. It was bold, often risky, but always delivered with charm. And beneath all that swagger there was a deeper purpose. Dean and Frank used their fame to stand up for what mattered in an era of segregation and hate. They took a stand. They refused to perform at venues that barred black or Jewish performers. They didn't just talk about equality, they backed it up with action, even when it meant risking big gigs. Their courage helped crack open doors that had been shut for too long. Even after the spotlight dimmed, the magic of the Rat Pack never really faded. Decades later, their swagger inspired the Ocean's 11 reboot with George Clooney and Brad Pitt channeling that same smooth charm. And in Dean Martin's old Palm Springs mansion, stories still lingered: tuxedos left hanging, vintage martini sets tucked away, photos of the gang frozen in time, from crewing under Vegas lights to rewriting the rules of showbiz. Dean Martin and the Rat Pack weren't just stars, they were a brotherhood. They were rebels in tuxedos. They were simply the definition of cool. Dean Martin's rocky marriages. Dean Martin wasn't just a crooner with charm, he was also a heartthrob who kept love close and marriage even closer. It all started in 1941 when a young Dean tied the knot with Elizabeth and MacDonald. Their love brought 4 children into the world: Craig in 1942, Claudia in 1944, Gail in 1945, and Dina in 1948. But as Martin's career began to rise, things at home began to unravel. By 1949 the marriage had ended. Dean was granted custody of their 4 children, an unusual twist for the time, and just like that he was single again. But he didn't stay solo for long. Just 1 week after his divorce, Martin married 22-year-old beauty queen Jean Beager, a model and former Orange Bowl princess. It was quick, yes, but it turned out to be the longest and most photographed relationship of his life. With her striking looks and his movie star appeal, Dean and Jean became one of Hollywood's golden couples. Together they had 3 children. Dean, Paul Ritchie, and Gina. Jean also stepped into the role of stepmom, raising Dean's 4 children from his first marriage as her own. She was the glue in what became a sprawling blended family, the matriarch of the Martin clan. For over 20 years, they lived the high life: red carpets, flashing cameras, matching tuxedos and gowns. But behind the glamour, cracks were forming. In 1969, the fairy tale ended. Dean filed for divorce and fans were crushed. To them this split hurt almost as much as his professional breakup with Jerry Lewis. True to his style, Martin later joked about it. It's supposed to be the gentlemanly thing to let the woman file, but I'm no gentleman. Even heartache came with a punchline still. Dean hadn't given up on love. He took one last shot at happily ever after in 1973, marrying Kathryn Hahn, a former receptionist with model looks. They didn't have children of their own, but together they adopted Sasha, a little girl who quickly became part of Dean's world. But this chapter too was short-lived. Within a few years the marriage ended in divorce, and this time Dean was done. He never remarried, yet despite the breakups and heartbreak, one thing stayed constant. Family mattered to Dean. Martin filmmaker Tom Dona once said that Dean really valued family, whether on stage, on screen, or at home. Dean was always chasing connection, and even though love didn't always last, his loyalty to those he called family never wavered. The tragedy of Dean Martin's life, for all his swagger, sly grins, and smooth talk, Dean Martin was at his core a family man. He might have played the charming rogue on stage, drink in hand and joke always ready, but off stage his world revolved around his kids, 8 in total, and none held a bigger piece of his heart than his namesake Dean Paul Dino Martin. Born from his second marriage to Jean Beager, Dino wasn't just Dean's golden boy, he was the embodiment of everything his father admired: talent, charm, and ambition. He sang, acted, and played professional tennis, and just when you thought that was enough, he added fighter pilot to the list, joining the California Air National Guard. Dino wasn't just following in his dad's footsteps, he was carving his own legendary path. But on March 21, 1986, that bright light went out. Dino took off on a routine training mission over the California desert, but somewhere over the cloud-covered mountains his jet vanished from radar. Radio silence followed, panic set in. The son of one of America's most beloved entertainers had disappeared into thin air, and the clock started ticking. The search kicked off immediately. Helicopters, planes, experts, nothing. Days passed, still nothing. Even President Ronald Reagan, a longtime friend of Dean's, deployed the nation's most advanced spy plane to join the effort back home. Martin was a wrecked, chain smoking in his Beverly Hills home, praying for a miracle. But deep down he feared the worst, and he wasn't alone. Frank Sinatra, Martin's old Rat Pack buddy and best friend, knew this kind of pain all too well. A decade earlier, his own mother had died in a plane crash in the exact same mountain range. Sinatra stood by Martin, voice trembling as he whispered, "If there's anything I can do, pal, anything at all." But there was nothing anyone could do. They could only wait for the call. Martin even turned to psychics, desperate to find Dino dead or alive. One psychic touched Dino's flight suit and immediately recoiled, saying he was gone. Another pointed straight to San Gorgonio Mountain, the very place Sinatra's mother had perished. 3 days in, the search team reached the mountain and uncovered what Dean had dreaded most: wreckage scattered across the slope. There were no survivors. Dino was gone at just 35. The news shattered Martin. Something inside him broke. Anyone who knew him could see it. The vibrant, charming, wise-cracking Dean Martin, the king of cool, had left the building. What remained was a shell of a man haunted by the loss of his son. Sinatra, ever the fixer, thought he had the answer. He invited Martin to join a massive stadium reunion tour, just like the old Rat Pack days. He figured the crowds, the spotlight, and the camaraderie would snap Dean out of his grief. Big mistake. Dean hated every second of it. While Frank was hyped for the late nights and roaring arenas, Martin preferred intimate club gigs. He didn't want to party till dawn anymore. He wanted peace instead. He got crowds he couldn't connect with, bright lights he couldn't stand, and an old friend he Couldn't relate to any more the cracks. Began to show fast on stage. Martin forgot lyrics, slurred his jokes, and once, yes, actually flicked a lit cigarette into the audience. The lovable drunk persona he'd built over decades now just seemed sad. It wasn't entertainment anymore, it was pain in a tuxedo after a particularly dismal night in New York. The trio returned to their hotel. Frank was ready to party. Sammy Davis Jr. was game, but Dean, he slammed his door in their faces. Later that night, he quietly boarded his private jet and flew back to L.A. without a word. The tour limped on without him. The crowds were shocked, the press swirled, but Martin was done pretending the magic was gone. Yet even as he retreated from the spotlight, one thing pulled him through: family. Losing Dino left a scar, but Dean still had 7 other children, and as they grew up, his family expanded. Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys became his son-in-law, so did Olympic figure skater Dorothy Hamill, actress Olivia Hussey, and even Lucello's daughter Carol. Life went on, and Martin held tight to the people who mattered most, but the years weren't kind. The drinks on stage may have been apple juice, but the cigarettes were always real. In September 1993, doctors at Cedar Sinai gave him grim news: lung cancer. Surgery could extend his life, they said. Martin declined. Maybe the man he used to be would have thought, but that man had died with Dino. By early 1995, Dean officially retired from public life. The charming crooner who once ruled Las Vegas, the silver screen, and the hearts of millions, quietly spent his final months with family and a few close friends. On Christmas Day 1995, Dean Martin passed away from acute respiratory failure in his Beverly Hills home. He was 78. In an eerie coincidence, it happened exactly 29 years to the day after his own mother had passed. The world lost its king of cool. No more crooning, no more charm, just the echo of a life that had dazzled millions but ended in solemn stillness. The real reason Dean cut Sinatra out of his life. Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra were once inseparable, the heart of the Rat Pack, Hollywood royalty, kings of charm and mischief, but behind the glitz and glamour their friendship spiraled into something darker, messier, and, according to many close to the crooner, Dean eventually cut Sinatra out of his life, not over petty arguments or rivalry, but because he couldn't handle the chaos that trailed behind Old Blue Eyes. One wild night in Beverly Hills may have been the final straw. It all went down on June 7, 1966, Dean Martin's 49th birthday. He and Sinatra, both at the height of their powers, decided to toast the occasion with their usual flair: fancy cocktails, close friends, and late-night luxury. The setting, the iconic Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel, a glamorous, dimly lit haven for celebrities, dealmakers, and trouble. Martin had every reason to celebrate. Between his film roles, music, television shows, and Vegas gigs, he was becoming the highest-paid entertainer of the era. Sinatra, 50, was no slouch either, still commanding stages and screens, deeply in love with 20-year-old Mia Farrow, and practically worshipped wherever he went. That night they were joined by actor Richard Key, best known now as Don Barzini from The Godfather, as well as Sinatra's time shadow and enforcer Jill Rizzo. A few unnamed women were there too, typical for a Rat Pack night out. Jill Rizzo was larger than life, a former club owner from New York. He was a burly man with a glass eye, known for his streetwise slang and loyalty to Sinatra. If Frank was the storm, Jilly was the thunder. As the birthday crew took over a large booth, their party immediately commanded attention. Laughter roared, drinks flowed, and colorful, sometimes offensive, language filled the air. It was Beverly Hills, and they were acting like they owned it. But not everyone at the Polo Lounge was charmed. At another booth nearby sat Frederick R. Wiseman, a 54-year-old multimillionaire and former president of Hunt's Foods. He wasn't just Rich, he was influential, respected in both the business and art worlds. That night he was joined by Franklin H. Fox, a 74-year-old Boston businessman and family friend. The two had come from a quiet dinner discussing their children's upcoming wedding and stopped in for a nightcap, but they weren't prepared for the Rat Pack's rowdy antics. For about 10 minutes they tried to ignore the commotion, but as the laughter grew louder and the language rougher, Weissman had enough. He leaned over to Sinatra's group and told them to tone it down. Something along the lines of, "You're too loud, and there are ladies here." Sinatra wasn't expecting the challenge at first. He thought Weissman was joking, then he realized the man was dead serious. Sinatra snapped back with a sharp, "You're out of line." But the celebration continued. What happened next is where the night turns murky and dangerous, depending on who you ask. The story unfolds in wildly different ways. According to Sinatra, Weissman suddenly punched him in the eye, giving him a black eye, and then somehow tripped and crashed into a cocktail table. No push, no punch back, just an accidental fall. Others, including Franklin Fox, claimed Sinatra made an anti-Semitic comment, insulted Weissman's glasses, and stormed off, only to return moments later in a full-blown rage. Martin and the others tried to hold him back, pleading with Frank to leave it alone, but in the heat of the moment Sinatra reportedly grabbed one of the Polo Lung's signature pink telephones and hurled it straight at Weissman's face, knocking him unconscious. Another version, a chaotic scramble, yelling, grabbing, confusion, and in the mess Weissman somehow ended up on the floor, flat on his back, not moving. But in every version one thing stayed the same. The thud. Frederick Weissman hit the ground with a sickening thud amid shattered crystal, a crumpled tablecloth, and a toppled ashtray. He wasn't waking up. Fox tried to revive him. Security rushed in. The Rat Pack crew quickly disappeared into the night, hustling Sinatra out before the police arrived. Paramedics wheeled Weissman out on a stretcher. Back at home, Dean Martin slipped into the house quietly. His teenage daughter Deanna was shocked to see him home so early on his own birthday. All he said was, "Frank blew a fuse tonight, he can't let it go." When asked if anyone got hurt, his answer was vague. I don't know anything." But things were far from over, though. Weissman was treated and sent home that night. He didn't wake up the next morning, or the next. He was rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital and diagnosed with a fractured skull. After hours of surgery, he lay in a coma. Doctors were unsure if he'd survive. When Beverly Hills Police Chief Clinton Anderson heard the update, he was alarmed. Sinatra was a known quantity, not just a celebrity, but a close friend of John F. Kennedy, with ties to both politics and organized crime. Still, a man was in a coma, and the details were murky at best. Anderson ordered a full investigation. Detectives interviewed hotel staff and guests, but the stories didn't add up. No one could say for certain what had happened. Was Weissman pushed, hit, or did he just fall on top of that? Sinatra and Martin had disappeared, flown out of town. Quite literally, Sinatra was in hiding. The chief told reporters, but not for long. He promised, as news of the incident spread, gossip columns had a field day. The idea of a Hollywood icon braining a millionaire with a telephone was irresistible, and even though no one had been charged yet, the damage was already done to reputations, relationships, and possibly to Martin and Sinatra's brotherhood. For Dean Martin, the night symbolized everything wrong with being Sinatra's friend: the constant spotlight, the unpredictability, the drama that followed Frank wherever he went. Martin was famously low-key offstage. He liked peace, quiet, and family. Sinatra was the opposite, all heat, impulse, and spectacle. They drifted apart after that night. Some say Martin stopped returning Sinatra's calls. Others claim he made a decision to pull away, realizing that being Frank's Friend wasn't worth the stress anymore. The bond that once ruled Las Vegas stages and Hollywood nights began to unravel. Frederick Wiseman eventually recovered, though it took time. Charges were never filed. The whole scandal was quietly swept under the thick rug of Beverly Hills high society, as so many others were in that golden era of fame and power. But Dean Martin never forgot that birthday he had shown up for a celebration. He left with a shattered friendship, a police investigation, and a deep unease that would never quite fade. Sometimes the glitz is just a cover for the cracks beneath. Do you think Dean Martin had a good reason to cut Frank Sinatra out of his life? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy